we finally have had a journalist who was at the Team USA scrimmages talking a little bit about how Caitlin Clark as an individual got on. So, if you guys didn't see, it is a Fever Insider podcast from Indy Star. It is Chloe Peterson, Brian Hanshin, and Annie Costable. Obviously, Annie was there.
Now let's clear up the Jackie Young situation, because it's been wildly misunderstood. Jackie Young said Paige Bueckers was the best young player in camp, and some fans reacted as if that was a direct shot at Caitlin Clark. It wasn't. This is how basketball players talk. Guards praise guards. Forwards praise forwards. Bigs praise bigs. It's not politics. It's not rivalry. It's recognition. Paige was playing well. Jackie acknowledged it. End of story. But there's a deeper lesson here if you look at Jackie Young's own career arc. At 22 years old, she averaged 6 points per game. At 23, that number jumped to 11. At 24, it rose again. She didn't become the elite, finals-dominating player we know today until she was 25 or 26. Caitlin Clark and Paige Bueckers are both 23. They're already performing at levels Jackie didn't reach until years later. That's not a criticism of Jackie Young. She's an outstanding player and a proven champion. It's context. Development isn't linear, and greatness doesn't arrive on the same timeline for everyone. What we're witnessing with Caitlin and Paige is accelerated growth, and Team USA isn't reacting to it with panic. They're responding with planning.
Even Sue Bird said it, even kind of she said it herself, where it's like, she's not, like she's 100% healthy, but she's not 100%. And I think a lot of people are like making a point being like, oh, Jackie Young said that Paige Bueckers was the best young player. And it's like, well, I'd be a bit disappointed if, as far as, first of all, when it comes to Jackie Young, she's a guard. Guards hype up guards, forwards hype up forwards. It's always the case. I would be very concerned if Paige Bueckers was not playing better than Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark's basically been injured for a year.
We finally got our first real glimpse inside Team USA's training camp, and almost immediately the noise started. Social media timelines filled up within minutes. Caitlin Clark looked rusty. Paige Bueckers looked sharper. Jackie Young praised Paige as the best young player in camp. And just like that, narratives were born. Conclusions were drawn. Lines were picked. But nearly all of those reactions completely missed what actually matters about these practices. Here's the context almost nobody bothered to acknowledge. Annie Costabile from the Indianapolis Star was one of the very few journalists granted access to the camp. And that access was extremely limited. The media was allowed to observe just 20 minutes at the end of day 1 and day 2 of a 3-day camp. That's it. 20 minutes. Not full practices. Not competitive scrimmages from start to finish. 20 minutes of basketball at the tail end of sessions designed to push elite athletes to exhaustion. Think about what that really means. These players are already tired. Some are coming back from injuries. Others are adjusting to new systems, new teammates, and a level of intensity that doesn't exist anywhere else in the sport. And from that tiny sample size, fans and commentators rushed to define who was ahead, who was behind, and what it all supposedly meant. That's not analysis. That's impatience. National team camps are not showcases. They're laboratories. They're places where coaches test combinations, stress bodies, and intentionally create uncomfortable situations. Players aren't trying to look good for highlights. They're trying to survive the workload while learning how to coexist with other elite talent. So when people say Caitlin Clark looked rusty, they're not wrong. But they're also not saying anything meaningful. Rust is expected. Rust is normal. Rust is temporary. What matters is whether there are red flags. And a short viewing window at the end of exhausting sessions is the worst possible place to search for definitive answers. The problem isn't that people notice differences. The problem is that they treated those differences as conclusions instead of observations. Team USA camp isn't about crowning winners after 2 days. It's about laying foundations. And if you're going to judge what's happening inside those practices, you have to understand what you're actually seeing, and more importantly, what you're not.
Miss that amount of time. It doesn't take time to get out of a rust. And that's the thing. When it comes to the WNBA season, Caitlin's going to be playing. She's going to be doing multiple of these camps. She's going to be doing multiple of these camps, and she's also going to be playing in the Team USA games in March, in their training camp games. So by the time the season starts, then we can actually make talk about something, because at the end of the day, I would say,
here's the reality that almost nobody wants to say out loud. If Caitlin Clark walked into this camp after months of rehab and immediately looked like the best player on the floor, that wouldn't be impressive. It would be alarming. It would suggest something is fundamentally broken in the competitive ecosystem of women's basketball. You don't miss months of high-level competition, step into national team environment, and instantly dominate players who are at their physical and mental peak. That's not how elite sports work. It never has been. Team USA camps are intentionally brutal. The pace is relentless. The expectations are unforgiving. Every possession is contested. Every mistake is punished. You're surrounded by players who were once your idols, players who have won championships, MVPs, Olympic gold medals. Nobody is taking plays off. This isn't a standard team practice where you can coast through a few possessions and catch your breath. You're competing for roster spots. You're competing for trust. You're competing under coaches who will determine your future on the international stage. The physical demand is extreme. The mental demand might be worse. Every drill matters. Every rep is evaluated. You're constantly adjusting new teammates, new roles, new spacing. And all of it happens while your body is being pushed beyond comfort. That's why conditioning matters so much. It's why rest shows. And it's why patience is required when evaluating players in this setting. Expecting Caitlin Clark to dominate this environment immediately ignores everything we know about how elite basketball actually functions. The fact that she's holding her own, moving well, and showing flashes is the only thing that truly matters right now.
To Annie Costable, Caitlin Clark looks healthy, but isn't 100%. As in, you can tell that she's rusty, but it's not like she's, in terms of her movement and everything, you can tell that she absolutely is going to be is 100% right. It's not like last year where she says she's 100% healthy and she's not, that she looks 100% healthy out there. Apparently the shot is there.
So at last, we finally got our first real look inside Team USA's training camp, and almost instantly the narrative started flying in every direction. Social media lit up within minutes. Clips were slowed down, screenshots were zoomed in, and hot takes were fired off like facts. Caitlin Clark looked rusty. Paige Buchers looked smoother. Jackie Young called Paige the best young player in camp. For many fans, that was all they needed to hear. Judgments were passed. Debates exploded. Lines were drawn. But almost everyone missed the actual point of what those practices were about. Here's the context that matters, and it's the context most people ignored. Annie Costabile of the Indianapolis Star was one of the very few legitimate basketball journalists granted access to Team USA camp. And even that access was extremely limited. The media wasn't allowed to sit through full practices. They didn't get to observe full scrimmages or extended competitive runs. They were given just 20 minutes at the end of day 1 and day 2 of a 3-day camp. That's it. 20 minutes. Think about what you're really seeing in that window. These players are already exhausted. Their bodies are heavy. Their legs are tired. Some are coming back from injuries. Others are adjusting to new teammates, new systems, and new roles. And from those final minutes of physically draining sessions, fans decided they had seen enough to declare winners and losers. That's not analysis. That's impatience. National team camps are not designed to showcase individual brilliance. They are not auditions for social media clips. They're stress tests. They're environments deliberately built to push elite players beyond comfort so coaches can evaluate how they respond when everything feels hard. The goal isn't to look smooth. The goal is to survive the workload while absorbing information and building chemistry. So yes, Caitlin Clark looked rusty. That should surprise absolutely no one. Rust is expected. Rust is normal. Rust is temporary. What matters is whether there are red flags, stiffness, hesitation, limited movement, visible pain. And according to the people who were actually there, none of those red flags were present. The problem is that fans aren't reacting to what matters. They're reacting to what's easiest to consume. This camp is not about who scores the most in a short viewing window. It's not about who looks flashier in drills. It's about understanding how elite players fit together under pressure. And you cannot determine that from 20 minutes of end-of-practice footage. Another important detail that gets lost in the noise is that Team USA camps are inherently uneven environments. Players arrive in very different stages of readiness. Some have been playing competitively up until recently. Others are just coming back. Some are in mid-season rhythm. Others are shaking off months of rust. Comparing them directly without acknowledging those differences is misleading at best and dishonest at worst. This is exactly why early narratives are so dangerous. Once they take hold, they shape how everything else is interpreted. Every missed shot becomes evidence. Every made shot becomes confirmation. And suddenly, a complex evaluation process is reduced to a binary argument that doesn't reflect reality. What also needs to be said is that Team USA is not panicking over Caitlin Clark's first camp reps. They expected this. They planned for it. They understand what a return to elite competition looks like after an injury and an extended break. The coaching staff is not evaluating her on perfection. They're evaluating trajectory. And trajectory matters far more than a few missed jumpers. When you watch these camps with the proper lens, the takeaway isn't that Caitlin is behind. The takeaway is that she's right where she should be at this stage of the process. Moving well, reading the floor, making the right passes, getting comfortable again in a high-speed environment. The mistake fans keep making is treating this like a ranking exercise instead of a developmental one. Team USA is not trying to crown the best player in December. They're trying to build the best team for when it actually counts. And that's the part almost everyone missed. These camps are about foundations, not finishes. They're about learning who complements who communicates well together, who understands spacing, who adapts quickly when things break down. None of that shows up clearly in a handful of clips at the end of practice. So when the narrative says Caitlin looked rusty, the correct response isn't panic. It's perspective. Rust is the first step back to rhythm, and rhythm is inevitable for players of her caliber. If anything, the overreaction says more about the audience than it does about the athlete. Because when you slow down, remove the noise, and listen to the people who are actually in the gym, a much calmer and more logical picture emerges. Caitlin Clark is healthy. She's readjusting. She's building chemistry. And Team USA is doing exactly what it's supposed to do at this stage. Everything else is just background noise.
It's really interesting, and this is my favorite thing about it is that, you know, Annie Costabile, who again, look, this is somebody who actually is a basketball journalist. She's not one of these weird people that don't give a damn about the sport and just want to push narratives. That she was saying basically that it's clear that the Caitlin versus Paige isn't a thing. That there's all these camps, they're trying to see how they play together. That Caitlin versus Paige, they're not competing against each other. That they're trying to see how Caitlin and Paige can play at the same time.